You thought Dirty Laundry was just another heartbreak song? Think again, because former NFL star Roy Williams just dropped a confession that flips Kelly Rowland's entire story on its head, and this time, the name everyone's whispering isn't his, it's Jay-Z. But before you jump to conclusions, this rabbit hole goes way deeper than anyone expected. We're talking secret relationships, paternity rumors, and a history that might rewrite Destiny's Child as we know it. So grab your tea, because this isn't just gossip, this is music industry history being rewritten in real time. Let's rewind to the moment that started all of this Kelly Rowland's Dirty Laundry. When that song dropped, it wasn't just music, it was a confession. Kelly poured her entire soul into those lyrics: pain, shame, heartbreak, everything. It was raw, emotional, and unfiltered, the kind of song that made you stop and say, wait, is she really saying what I think she's saying? Because this wasn't some breakup anthem. This was a cry for help in melody form. She sang about being hurt, isolated, and trapped in an abusive relationship, while also being forced to smile for the cameras beside her best friend, Beyoncé, who was on top of the world. Every line felt like a secret being ripped open, and fans couldn't look away. But here's where it gets interesting. The internet didn't just listen. It started investigating. Everyone wanted to know, who was Kelly talking about? Who was this mysterious man who had broken her down and made her feel invisible? And just like that, the rumor mill spun out of control. The obvious suspect was Roy Williams, her ex-fiancé, former NFL star, and the only public relationship Kelly had during that time. The math seemed to check out: the timing, the heartbreak, the silence. So the internet did what it always does best. It filled in the blanks. Headlines painted Roy as the villain, the man behind the pain, the monster in Kelly's melody. For years, people ran with that version of the story. Roy stayed quiet. Kelly never said a name. And fans assumed the mystery was solved, right? Wrong! Because over a decade later, Roy Williams finally broke his silence. And what he said didn't just change the story, it shattered it. And when he finally opened his mouth, the name that came next, it wasn't his. It was someone much bigger, someone whose reputation could shake the entire music industry. After years of silence, Roy Williams finally spoke. And when he did, it wasn't through gossip blogs, it wasn't in some messy tweet storm, it was calm, confident, and straight to the point. He looked dead into the camera and said, "Yes, I was engaged to Kelly Rowland, but I never laid a hand on her." Boom! Just like that, the internet's favorite theory cracked down the middle. Because for years, everyone had him pegged as the abuser, the villain in Kelly's story. But Roy didn't flinch. He didn't point fingers. He just cleared his name with quiet conviction. And here's where it gets even more powerful. Roy didn't come off defensive or bitter. He came off tired. Tired of holding back while strangers painted him as a monster. Tired of being silent while people built entire stories out of half-truths. He said he'd stayed quiet for years because he wanted to move on, but now? Now he felt like the truth deserved its moment too. He said, "People told me not to say anything. But when you've been wrongly accused of something that ugly, you can't just sit back forever." That line right there hit differently because it wasn't just him defending himself. It was him reclaiming his peace after a decade of being misunderstood. And that's when fans started to pause and rethink everything they thought they knew. If Roy wasn't the one Kelly was singing about in Dirty Laundry, then who was? The conversation shifted instantly from poor Kelly to, hold on, wait a second. Because if it wasn't Roy, the man the world had villainized for years, then that means the real story, the real truth, was still hiding somewhere in the shadows. And that's when the whispers started again. Old theories resurfaced. New names entered the chat. And one of those names was so big it sent shockwaves through the entire Destiny's Child fan base. Because this time, the spotlight turned toward someone else. Someone with power. Someone untouchable. Someone named Jay-Z. And that's when things took a sharp left turn straight into the Carter's lane. Because once Roy's name was cleared, fans started asking the question nobody ever dared to say out loud, could the man behind Kelly's pain actually be Jay-Z? Now before you roll your eyes, think about it. Jay-Z wasn't just any random celebrity in Kelly's orbit. He was the powerful producer, the industry heavyweight, the gatekeeper every young artist wanted approval from. And back in the early 2000s, he wasn't just Beyoncé's future husband. He was the man who had access to Destiny's Child from the very beginning. He was in the studio, he was backstage. He was the mentor figure hovering around these young, talented women barely out of their teens. So when people started connecting the timelines, the coincidences stopped feeling like coincidences. Because right around the time Kelly was writing songs about pain, isolation, and betrayal, Jay-Z was stepping deeper into Beyoncé's world and Kelly was quietly fading into the background. The rumor mill exploded. Whispers said Jay-Z and Kelly might have shared a private something before Beyoncé ever entered the picture. Nothing confirmed, of course, just side eyes, chemistry, and moments fans swore they could feel on camera. And here's where it gets even more tangled. In interviews, Jay-Z often spoke about Destiny's Child as family protective, proud, close. But fans started replaying old footage, noticing glances that lingered just a little too long, smiles that looked a little too familiar. That energy, the kind that can't be faked, was there. And when Kelly dropped Dirty Laundry, some people swore the song wasn't just about abuse. It was about a forbidden relationship that ended badly. Roy hinted at it too, saying Kelly had more than one ex during that period. He never said a name, but he didn't have to. Because when he dropped that line, the internet took off running straight toward Jay-Z's name. And that theory only grew stronger when fans started comparing notes. Jay-Z was older, established, and known for mentoring young female artists. Kelly, vulnerable, ambitious, desperate to carve her own path outside Beyoncé's shadow. It was the perfect storm and the perfect secret to keep hidden. But here's the wild part: once people started digging, the story didn't stop there. Because the deeper you go into Kelly's timeline, the more everything starts to connect. The lyrics, the silence, the body language, even the interviews where Kelly dodged personal questions, all of it suddenly pointed in one direction. And the internet being the internet, they weren't about to stop at theories, they wanted receipts. And that's when things went from rumor to full-blown obsession, because what fans uncovered next didn't just involve Kelly, it involved her family. And that's where we head next, because in Section 4, the story goes from music gossip to a timeline so messy, it might just rewrite everything we thought we knew about Destiny's Child. So let's line up the timeline, because when you do, things start to look real different. We're talking about the early 2000s. Destiny's Child is everywhere. Beyoncé's becoming the breakout star. Kelly's fighting for her own spotlight. And Jay-Z? He's the kingmaker. The man who could make or break your entire career with a single cosign. At that time, Kelly and Beyoncé were still practically kids, late teens, early 20s, fresh out of Houston, bright-eyed and trusting. And Jay? He was already a heavyweight in hip-hop, dripping in status, money, and industry power. That's not just mentorship territory, that's temptation territory. It's that blurred line between professional and personal that so many artists fall into, and sometimes it doesn't end with a clean break. Now think about Dirty Laundry again. Kelly wasn't just singing about pain. She was singing about being overshadowed, about loving someone who made her feel invisible next to another woman. And that other woman? Fans have long suspected it was Beyoncé. The lyrics even mention watching her shine, standing in the background while smiling through tears. So if Jay-Z was involved, that changes everything. It's no longer just a story of abuse or heartbreak, it's a story of betrayal, power, and silence. Because imagine the emotional chaos of being hurt by someone who was not only your mentor. And here's where it gets even crazier: the timing. The moment Kelly released Dirty Laundry, Jay-Z and Beyoncé were already solidified as music royalty. They were untouchable. So no matter what Kelly said in that song, nobody was really going to dig deeper into who she was talking about. It was like her truth got buried under the Carter's empire. But then came the internet-age TikTok detectives, Reddit timelines, old interview clips resurfacing out of nowhere. People started pulling receipts, finding moments that didn't sit right, and piecing together a story that had been whispered about for decades. Suddenly, those old fan theories didn't sound so far-fetched anymore. Jay-Z was there when Kelly's career started to plateau. He was there when her spotlight dimmed and Beyoncé's soared. And if you believe the fan theories, that's not a coincidence. That's fallout. Because when you've been hurt by someone that powerful, silence becomes survival. And what's wild is this isn't just speculation. People have caught on-camera moments that feel uncomfortable. Times when Kelly and Jay-Z shared quick glances at award shows or walked red carpets with tension so thick you could feel it through the screen. And when fans replayed those clips after Roy Williams cleared his name, let's just say the internet started connecting dots that had been sitting in plain sight for years. It's like every piece of Kelly's story, the lyrics, the interviews, the distant look in her eyes whenever Jay's name came up, suddenly clicked into place. And what those pieces painted wasn't pretty. Because if the rumors are true, Dirty Laundry wasn't just about heartbreak. It was a coded confession about a love that was forbidden, hidden, and ultimately destroyed by fame. And the deeper you go into this story, the more tangled it becomes, because just when people thought the timeline couldn't get messier, the paternity rumors hit the internet like a wrecking ball. And that takes us straight into Section 5, where things go from emotional heartbreak to full-blown scandal. And here's where this whole thing goes from a whispered rumor to a viral theory the internet refuses to let die. Because after Roy Williams cleared his name and people started whispering about Jay-Z, fans began to notice something they'd overlooked for years: Kelly's son, Titan. At first, it was innocent. Someone online pointed out how much Titan's smile looked like Jay-Z's. Then someone else zoomed in on his eyes, then the nose, then the jawline. And before you knew it, the internet was on fire. Twitter threads popped up overnight. Reddit detectives were comparing photos side by side, Titan next to Jay-Z, Titan next to Blue Ivy, and the resemblance. Uncanny. People were posting, "Why does Titan look like Jay-Z and Blue Ivy had a twin?" That one tweet alone hit millions of views and kicked off a storm that Kelly could never have predicted. Now, here's where it gets wild, because just when the theory started to die down, cameras caught something that reignited it all. At the Harder They Fall movie premiere, Jay-Z was working the red carpet, cool as ever, until he saw Kelly Rowland. In that instant, everything about him changed. His face lit up, his posture shifted, and his entire energy softened. He didn't just greet her like a friend. He looked at her like someone from his past. And listen, body language doesn't lie. Fans slowed down the footage frame by frame, analyzing every blink, every smile. Jay leaned in closer than he needed to. Kelly's laugh looked nervous, warm, but hesitant. That moment, barely 10 seconds long, was enough to send the internet spiraling all over again. Comment sections flooded instantly. Some said, "That's old flame energy." Others said, "You can see history between them." And a few brave souls straight up called it baby mama vibes. Now, was it proof? Number. But in the world of pop culture, perception is everything. And this one small interaction was all fans needed to reignite the theory that maybe Kelly's song Dirty Laundry was about Jay-Z all along. People started lining up the timeline again. When did Kelly disappear from the spotlight? When did Jay and Beyoncé's relationship go public? And why did Kelly's career seem to slow down right as Beyoncé's empire exploded? Every overlap, every date, every photo started to feel connected. And that's the thing about the internet: once people start connecting dots, it becomes impossible to stop the snowball. Fans even dug up interviews where Kelly called Jay family, saying he'd always been there for her. But when those clips resurfaced years later, they sounded less like affection and more like cover. It's the kind of theory that lives on whispers and side eyes, the kind that never dies because nobody involved will ever confirm or deny it. And in today's world, silence often speaks the loudest. So when Jay-Z smiled at Kelly that night, the world didn't see two old friends reconnecting. They saw a spark of something unfinished, a secret peeking out from beneath the surface. And for the internet, that was enough. Because if Jay really was Kelly's mystery man, and if her dirty laundry was more literal than we thought, then the story isn't just about heartbreak anymore. It's about betrayal, silence, and the cost of protecting a legend. And as fans began asking louder questions, another storm started brewing, one that dragged Roy Williams right back into the mix, but this time for a completely different reason. And just when people thought the rumors couldn't get any darker, they did. Because Jay-Z's name was already tied to another long-running scandal. Enter Rymir Satterthwaite, the man who says Jay-Z is his father. His mother claims she got pregnant when she was just 16, and for over a decade, Rymir begged Jay-Z to take a simple DNA test. But every time, Jay's legal team blocks it, delays it, or disappears it. Court filings, sealed documents, endless motions like the man is hiding something no amount of money could bury. And here's where it all connects. If the rumors about Kelly are true and Jay really was involved with her when she was young, then Rymir's story fits a disturbing pattern. Older, powerful, protected, while the truth gets swept away. One DNA test could end this in minutes, but after 15 years, Jay-Z still hasn't taken it. And that silence? It's deafening. Because the moment you start questioning one secret, you start seeing all the others. And the next one takes us straight into Destiny's Child's darkest memory. To understand how deep this goes, we need to go back to the early 2000s, when Destiny's Child was still touring the world. Beyoncé's father, Matthew Knowles, dropped a bomb years later that most fans missed. He claimed both Beyoncé and Kelly were sexually harassed on tour by members of Jagged Edge. They were just 16. The men were in their 20s. Matthew said he got a frantic call from the girls, terrified and crying, begging for help. He stormed onto that bus in Louisiana and kicked the men off on the spot. That story changed everything. Because if those kinds of things were happening on tour, who knows what else was going on behind closed doors? It painted a picture of two young women surrounded by fame but completely unprotected. And that context makes Kelly's dirty laundry feel a lot less like art and a lot more like confession. And when people revisited her interviews after hearing that, they noticed something. A quiet sadness, a shadow that never left. Which leads us straight into what might be the most emotional part of all Kelly's life in Beyoncé's shadow. Kelly's always been honest about it. Living in Beyoncé's shadow wasn't easy. She once said, "There was a whole decade where it was like the elephant in the room. Every award show, every red carpet, every interview, she was the other girl." But what if that shadow wasn't just about fame? What if it was about secrets, heartbreak, silence, and betrayal? Because imagine losing your best friend. And maybe your man. All in one move. That's not jealousy, that's trauma. Fans now look back at her interviews differently. The long pauses, the careful answers, the forced smiles, all of it makes sense. Kelly wasn't bitter. She was protecting herself. And that's the tragedy of it when you love someone enough to protect their reputation, even if it means burying your own truth. But that silence couldn't last forever. Because when Roy Williams cleared his name, the secret Kelly had spent years protecting came roaring back. And that brings us to the big question, the one everyone's too scared to say out loud. Roy cleared his name. Jay-Z stayed silent. And Kelly? She never said who her dirty laundry ex really was, but she once admitted he was powerful, still in the industry. That narrows it down real fast. Now, fans believe the pieces fit too perfectly to ignore the lyrics, the timeline, the glances, even her child's resemblance. When you add in the Rymir scandal, the history, and the silence, the pattern is hard to unsee. Is any of it confirmed? Number. But where there's this much smoke, there's usually a fire. And this one has been burning quietly for decades. So, what do you think? Was Jay-Z Kelly Rowland's mystery ex, or is this the internet connecting dots that were never there? Drop your theory below because I want to know which side you're on. And before you go, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because the next video is waiting on your screen? Yeah, and it's another bombshell you don't want to miss.